An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643, the most influential work in the science of Hadith ever. F. Licensing something the licensor has not yet heard or received at all, to a licensee to relate when the licensor afterward receives it. Someone who reported from the judge Iyad ibn Musa, one of the illustrious figures of his age in North Africa, informed me that he said, "I have not seen any of the teachers of old speak about this, and I saw some of the modern scholars and our contemporaries doing it." It was said that Abu Walid Yunus ibn al-Mughith, the judge of Cordova, was asked to license all of the material he had related up to that date, and all of what he would later relate, and he refused. The person who asked him became angry, and one of his colleagues said to him, "He should give you something he has not taken? That is impossible." Iyad said, "This is the correct view." This view can be supported whether licensing is judged to be communicating the licensed material collectively or to be granting permission. If licensing is considered to be communication, this kind of licensing is not valid, because how can a person communicate something he has no information about? If licensing is considered to be granting permission, the invalidation rests upon the dispute over the validation of granting permission in deputation for something that the person giving the permission, the deputizer, does not yet possess. An instance of this would be someone appointing an agent to sell a slave which he intends to buy. Indeed, some Shafi'is permitted that. The correct view is that this kind of licensing is invalid, so it is incumbent on whoever wants to transmit by license from a teacher who has granted him license, for instance, of all that he has heard, to undertake an investigation in order to ascertain that the material he wants to transmit from him is something which the teacher heard before the date of licensing. When the teacher says, "I hereby license to you everything I heard which seems valid to you and will seem valid to you," it is not like the above case. Indeed, Daraqutni and others did do this. It is permissible for the student to transmit from his teacher by virtue of that formula whatever after the granting of the license become established in his mind as being something the teacher heard before licensing. That is permitted, even if the teacher says only everything which seems valid to you, without and will seem valid to you. This is because what is meant by "I hereby license you to transmit from me everything which seems valid to you," and the point to be taken into consideration in that case is the validity of that material in the student's mind at the time he relates it. God knows best. G. Licensing previously licensed material. For instance, the teacher says, "I hereby license you the materials licensed to me," or "I hereby license you to transmit everything I was licensed to transmit." Some modern scholars whose views are not taken into consideration have forbidden this. The correct view, and the one which is followed in practice, is that it is permissible. It is not comparable to the forbidden practice of deputizing an agent without the permission of the original deputizer. I read that the North African expert Abu Amr al-Safaqusi said, "I heard the expert Abu Nu'aym al-Isbahani say, licensing on the basis of licensing is effective and permissible." The expert Khatib related that the Hadith expert and authority Abu Hasan al-Daraqutni and the expert Abu al-Abbas, known as Ibn al-Uqda al-Kufi, and others permitted it. The jurist and ascetic Nasr ibn Ibrahim al-Maqdisi used to transmit by licensing from licensing, sometimes to the extent of putting together 3 consecutive licensings in his transmission. The student who transmits previously licensed material on the basis of a license should study the particulars and dictates of the licensing granted by the teacher of his teacher, in order that he does not transmit by it something that does not properly come under it. When, for example, the licensing of the teacher's teacher takes the form, "I hereby license to him everything I heard which seems valid to him," and the student has seen some of the material heard by the teacher of his teacher, he may not transmit this material from his own teacher from his teacher until it becomes clear that it is something which in the view of the teacher belonged to the material heard by the teacher who licensed him. The mere fact that the material now seems valid to the student is not enough to fulfill the words and stipulation of his teacher's teacher. The blunders of those who do not understand this and similar matters will be many, and God knows best. These are the types of licensings which require explanation, and other types can be derived from them. Those who study the matter will be able to figure out how the other types should be dealt with on the basis of what we have dictated. God, He exalted, willing. We will now draw attention to some other matters. Number 1. We heard the author and literateur Abu Hasan Ahmed ibn al-Faris, God bless him, say, the meaning of licensing, ijaza, in the speech of the early Arabs is derived from giving a quantity of water, jawaz al-ma', whereby the livestock and crops in someone's possessions may be watered. It is said, I asked X to give me a quantity of water, and he gave me a quantity of water, when he gives you water for your land and your livestock. In the same fashion, the student asks the scholar to give him a drink of his knowledge, and he gives him a drink of it. In accordance with this interpretation, the licensor should say, I hereby license X everything I heard or everything I relate, making it transitive without any preposition, there being no need to mention the phrase the transmission of or anything similar. Those who equate licensing with allowing, granting permissions, or authorizing need to do that, and that is recognized. The licensor should then say, for instance, I hereby license to X the transmission of everything I heard. Some advocates of this view nevertheless say, I hereby license to him everything I heard. This is a form of ellipsis, the like of which is not obscure. God knows best. 2. Licensing is recommended only when the licensor is knowledgeable regarding what he is licensing, and the licensee is a scholar, because licensing is a facilitation and a concession suitable for scholars because of the pressing need for it. Some of them have gone too far in this regard and made this recommendation a stipulation for licensing. Abu Abbas al-Walid ibn Malik al-Maliki related such a view from Malik, God be pleased with him. The expert Abu Umar ibn Abdul Bar said, the correct view is the licensing is only permitted for the person skilled in the craft and for something specific without problems in its isnad. God knows best. Number 3. When the licensor writes his license, he should pronounce it loudly. If he merely writes it, it is still permissible form of licensing when it is coupled with the intention of licensing. However, it is inferior in status to the license spoken out loud. Reckoning that kind of licensing as sound is not far-fetched, because merely writing the license belongs to the same class of transmission as recitation to the teacher, which, although the teacher does not pronounce the material recited to him, has been made tantamount to his communicating to the student the material recited to him, as was explained above. God knows best. 4. Transference, munawala. In the fourth means of receiving and taking up hadith, it has two forms. A. Transference. Transference coupled with licensing, this is the absolute highest kind of licensing. It takes several forms. One of them is the teacher handing the student the original text of his audition or a copy collated against it, saying, this is my audition or my transmission from X, transmit it from me. Or, I hereby license you to relate it from me, and then placing it in his possession. Or, the teacher saying, take it, copy it, collate your copy against it, and then return it to me, or something similar. Another form is the student bringing the teacher a book or personal collection of his hadith and presenting it to him. The teacher, assuming he is cognizant and alert, examines it and it returns it to him, saying, I have read what is in this, and they are my hadith from X. Or my transmission from my teachers is in it, so transmit it from me. Or I hereby license you to transmit it from me. Several of the authorities in hadith have called this presentation, ard. In another earlier discussion of recitation to the teacher, we said that it was also called presentation. So let us call that presentation by recitation. And let us call the other one presentation by transference. Ard al-Qira'a wa Ard al-Munawala. God knows best. This transference coupled with licensing occupies the place of audition in the opinion of Malik and a number of the authorities in hadith. The expert Abu Abdullah al-Hakim al-Naysaburi related from many of the early scholars that the aforementioned presentation by transference is equal to audition. This applies as well to the similar forms of transference coupled with licensing. Among those whom al-Hakim related this view were a number of the Madanese, including Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, Rabi'at al-Ra'i, Yahya bin Sa'id al-Ansari, and Imam Malik ibn Anas, and some Meccans, including Mujahid, Abu Zubair, Ibn Uyayna, and some Kufans like Alqama al-Nakhai, Ibrahim al-Nakhai, Alqama ibn Qais al-Nakhai, and Ibrahim al-Nakhai, and Sha'bi. A group of Basrans, including Qatada, Abu al-Aliya, and Abu al-Muwakkil al-Naji, and also a number of Egyptians, including Ibn al-Wahhab, Ibn al-Qasim, and Ashhab, and others in Syria and Khurasan. Al-Hakim also saw that a number of his own teachers subscribed to that view. There is some confusion in al-Hakim's discussion because he is, in some cases, makes confounding remarks regarding presentation by recitation, with comments on presentations by transference, and he has treated them the same. The correct view is that the transference by presentation cannot take the place of audition, and that it is inferior in status to verbal transmission and communication through recitation. Indeed, al-Hakim himself said that about this kind of presentation. The jurists of Islam who give opinions over the permissible and the forbidden did not regard it as equal to audition. Shafi'i, Awza'i, Buwaiti, Muzani, Abu Hanifa, Sufyan al-Thawri, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ibn al-Mubarak, Yahya bin Yahya, and Ishaq ibn Rahawayh advocated that opinion. We observed our authorities adhering and subscribing to it, and we do it too. God knows best. Stay tuned for many more parts.